So if you've been anywhere near a screen lately, you are probably exhausted, just exhausted by the high volume, nonstop political argument that's dominating public life.
Oh, absolutely. The endless loop of who is a Nazi, who is a bigot, all the demands for censorship and deplatforming.
A compelling drama, for sure, and it feels like the most important thing happening in the world.
It feels like it. And it is mesmerizing.
Yeah.
But according to the extensive sources we've stacked up here, that visible, high-stakes identity brawl is fundamentally a distraction.
A distraction.
Yeah, it's masking a much deeper, more strategic foreign policy debate that began almost immediately after the last inauguration.
And that is the mission for this deep dive.
Mhm.
We are peeling back that curtain. We want to uncover the core, quiet conflict, a debate about U.S. national interest, and the very specific rhetorical tactics used to suppress it.
We have to rewind the clock back to January.
Exactly. What were the priorities being set at the highest levels of government, right out of the gate?
Well, our source material alleges that immediately following the inauguration, the strategic objective being pursued by key foreign actors was war.
War.
Specifically, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, was the first head of state to visit the White House.
Sure.
And the purpose of this and subsequent visits was not merely diplomatic. It was allegedly to secure unambiguous American support for a regime change war in Iran.
Okay, let's unpack that term for the listener. When we talk about a regime change war, what are we actually talking about, and why Iran? Why was Iran the target from this specific perspective?
A regime change war means using U.S. military power to overthrow the existing government of a sovereign nation. I mean, just think back to Iraq in 2003.
Right.
As for why Iran, Israel views Iran as its single greatest existential threat in the region. Their concerns are twofold. Iran possesses dangerous conventional weapons, and then there's the potential that Iran might acquire a nuclear weapon.
Which would end Israel's current status as the region's only nuclear power.
Exactly, their regional nuclear monopoly.
What's fascinating here, and what the source is really stark about, is the operational requirement. It's not just about political support, is it?
No, not at all. The source asserts that Israel could not survive alone in a conflict with Iran. It allegedly wouldn't last 24 hours against Iran's conventional capabilities alone.
24 hours, that's a huge claim.
It is, and it speaks to geography and missile reach. If that source is accurate, it means American military support isn't negotiable. It is absolutely required for that conflict to be waged successfully.
So Israel is essentially requiring the U.S. to fight a war it cannot fight on its own.
That's what the source alleges.
And this brings us to the core, unasked debate in Washington. The one that was hidden beneath all the sound and fury on cable news.
The essential question.
Is it in America's interest to commit billions of dollars and American lives to participate in yet another war of regime change in the Middle East? Especially one inspired by the strategic concerns of a foreign nation. We all know how the last one, Iraq, turned out for the U.S.
And that is the substantive, critical coffin of conflicting national interests, U.S. versus Israel. But the sources show that the proponents of the war, those pushing for regime change, allegedly never admitted this was the goal.
Why not?
Because they couldn't admit it. They knew they couldn't win the substantive debate on the merits of U.S. cost versus U.S. benefit.
So instead of a policy debate, they pivoted.
Immediately.
Yeah.
They moved from foreign policy to identity.
Yeah.
And this is the strategy of intimidation we're seeing play out today.
So how did that rhetorical shift actually work?
It was aggressive. Opponents of U.S. military involvement were immediately accused of being Nazis.
Yeah.
Or they had their patriotism questioned with a direct challenge like, why do you hate the Jews?
Wow. So it reframed a geopolitical military question as a moral identity-based attack.
Yes, and this requires us to look at the conflation argument the source makes, which is a powerful point.
Which is that the nation of Israel, with its military and its government, is not synonymous with all Jews in the world.
Exactly. The source emphasizes that many Jewish people globally oppose a war with Iran, where they hold complicated feelings about Israeli policy. But professional defenders of Israeli policy in the U.S., especially those advocating for U.S. military commitment, often referred to as neocon figures in the source material.
Meaning those who prioritize aggressive foreign intervention.
Right. They immediately collapse that distinction. They make the debate about American military action into a debate about anti-Semitism.
And the effect of this tactic was, it was wildly successful, wasn't it?
Incredibly effective at silencing critics. People were intimidated into silence. They were unwilling to push back against the demand for intervention for fear of getting that career-ending label of bigot.
And this worked despite the fact that, as the sources explicitly state, there is zero evidence that past U.S.-led regime change wars have benefited America in any meaningful way.
It was a clear prioritization of rhetorical victory over, substantive policy discussion.
So ultimately, the debate quieted down in June. What was
Right.
the outcome? Did the U.S. go to war?
They narrowly avoided a full regime change war, but the U.S. certainly committed military force. Our sources note the U.S. committed to bombing Iran and spending billions to protect Israel from the predictable retaliations.
But the bitterness remained.
The bitterness remained because the proponents of the war refused to state their real aims, ensuring that the core debate about U.S. interests never happened out in the open.
Now we have to move to the cost of this rhetorical strategy on American political life. The sources reserve some of their sharpest critiques for elements of the institutional right and conservatism.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
How did they allegedly betray their own principles here?
Well, many were elected on platforms that vehemently opposed identity politics, censorship, and cancel culture. Yet when it came to silencing critics of this specific foreign policy agenda, they suddenly embraced the very tactics they claimed to despise.
So it was a complete reversal.
A complete 180. The source is clear. Censorship is incompatible with democratic governance and violates the spirit, if not the letter, of the First Amendment. But in this context, certain right-wing commentators and figures got very excited about censoring opponents of a foreign policy push.
And the rhetoric used by specific figures it's shocking. It illustrates just how quickly this debate degenerated. We're talking about figures like Mark Levin, for instance.
The examples are extreme. Levin allegedly called opponents of the war Jew-hating thugs and members of the Third Reich.
The Third Reich.
Yes. And what's key here is the inversion of the argument. A debate about whether American young people should fight and die in Iran is reframed, not as policy, but as a mythical existential struggle.
A struggle against the Babylonians or Hitler.
Who were allegedly trying to kill the Jews.
Mhm.
It completely obscures the fact that U.S. military power is the actual subject under discussion.
This emotional manipulation, according to the source, is just toxic. It suggests a strong warning.
That this kind of rhetoric is a call to violence, and that the real battle is internal.
What do they mean by internal?
The risk of becoming the very people you despise. The risk of moral degradation from constantly wallowing in hate, which this source sums up as staring at Mark 11 too much.
And the only antidote cited is what?
Genuine personal responsibility. Admitting fault sincerely. The host of the original source pointed to his own public apology to Liz Cheney for a past attack as a model for moving past that hate.
And this rhetorical dissent, it brings us to a concept that many of us hoped was, long dead in Western civilization. Blood guilt.
Blood guilt. The idea that guilt is based on birth or DNA, leading to collective punishment for an entire group of people.
It's chilling.
The source strongly warns against this, citing figures like Mark Levin and even the Prime Minister of Israel, who allegedly called for murdering civilians and children in Gaza because they were stained by blood guilt.
The source defines this attitude as the very basis of genocide, calling it un-Christian and un-American.
It does. If we look at the universalist view, which is really the cornerstone of genuine Western thinking, it demands the total rejection of blood guilt and collective punishment.
It's a belief in the dignity of the individual.
And their capacity for change, regardless of their origin. It's the belief that we have no permanent enemies, only policy disagreements. When you abandon that, you abandon the core premise of democracy.
Which is to deal with citizens as individuals, not as representatives of some DNA-defined group.
Exactly.
So this whole deep dive started with foreign policy, but the true consequence of this distraction is seen right here at home. A profound contempt for actual American priorities.
Yes, it's about legislative bandwidth and attention. When the government is consumed by conflicts defined by a foreign lobby like whether we go to war with Iran, it stops acting on the priorities of the American majority.
Things like healthcare, family formation, divorce laws, or, and this is a critical one, the economic issue of usury.
Right. And let's use the Ben Shapiro example the source material highlights because it illustrates this disconnect perfectly. He was confronted about Venezuela's culturally conservative laws, specifically that Maduro's regime bans usury.
Which is the practice of charging exorbitant interest rates.
And his alleged response revealed a total lack of concern.
What was the response?
His alleged response, which the source quotes, was, "Who gives an expletive?" That's the operative phrase. It completely dismisses the domestic concerns that matter most to working Americans.
But the sources explain exactly why we should give a why we should care about usury.
Of course.
It's not just some esoteric financial term. It's a social and economic destroyer.
Precisely. The source links usury directly to debt slavery.
Hmm.
We're talking about payday loans with annual interest rates reaching 600%.
600%.
This debt traps young people. It often prevents them from being able to save, to marry, to form families, or buy homes. The source argues that this destruction of young people's ability to live stable lives is a primary concern for the American majority.
Yet figures like Shapiro allegedly show utter contempt for it, prioritizing foreign interests and GDP over the social condition of the people.
And this contempt is further cemented by other controversial statements cited in the source, where Shapiro allegedly suggests young Americans shouldn't feel entitled to live where they grew up.
And that retirement at 65 is a stupid idea.
Right. Those statements reflect a profound philosophical problem. A leadership class that views the people it governs as disposable or replaceable, rather than as a body worthy of care and protection.
That attitude that the people of this country don't really matter is deemed anti-American.
Because it suggests that the leadership's primary focus lies elsewhere, completely disconnected from the daily reality of most citizens.
And that ultimately brings us back to the core finding. The sources conclude that a leadership that does not genuinely love the people it leads, that holds this level of contempt for their economic and social survival, is fundamentally incompatible with democracy.
It is incompatible because it cannot win in the marketplace of ideas. It requires censorship, bullying, and identity warfare to succeed.
Because it can't defend its actual policies.
Or its lack of concern for domestic pain points like usury. The entire strategy is to change the topic from what affects your life to who you should hate.
So, to synthesize this entire deep dive, the ongoing political panic over identity and censorship is a perfectly engineered mechanism. It successfully diverts your attention away from a crucial foreign policy debate.
Whether the U.S. should commit to another resource-draining war for a foreign power.
And simultaneously distracts you from pressing domestic concerns like debt slavery, healthcare, and the collapse of family formation.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question of sovereignty and agency for you, the learner. Are you defining your own priorities, economic, social, domestic, based on what impacts your life?
Or are you allowing external forces and the noise of rhetorical warfare to dictate what you must care about and, perhaps more dangerously, who you must despise?
Remember, according to the sources we analyzed, the only legitimate purpose of government is to represent its own people.
Think about how much of the current political fight actually serves that purpose.